Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today we will discuss the articles displayed on the screen from the Delhi edition of The Hindu newspaper dated 1st July 2019. So let us start our discussion for the day. Now this article on page number 7 is related to the issue of heat wave that is prevalent in the state of Maharashtra in the present year. And as you would be knowing, in the General Studies paper 3 of the mains examination, disaster management is one of the important topics. So this will form a part of the disaster management under paper 3. Now if you go through the previous year questions in the mains examination related to the disaster management topic, you will find that every year there is one question in the General Studies paper 3. So if you go to the question that was asked in 2018, it was related to the Sendai framework. And how is the Sendai framework different from the Yogo framework of 2005? Further, there have been questions related to the disaster management of important natural events like occurrence of tsunami, earthquakes, and drought and El Nino and La Nina fallouts for India. So similarly, the topic related to heat waves becomes important for us from exam point of view. And as you can see in this table, every year there has been one question related to disaster management. So in the year 2015, it was the earthquakes. 2016, it was related to cloudburst and the urban floods. And in 2017, it was related to the tsunami. So now let us try to understand some basic facts related to heat waves and which can be used in your answers related to heat waves. Now the topic of heat wave has been discussed in detail in the Focus magazine of the June month. So let us look at some key points which are related to the heat wave. So first let us define what is meant by this term heat wave. So simply a heat wave is a period of abnormally high temperatures which are more than the normal maximum temperature that occurs during the summer season. And it is specially related to the northwestern part of India and the central part of India where temperature usually surges above the normal recorded maximum temperatures. Typically it is prevalent in the month of March to June when India faces summer season. And this sudden rise in temperature results in atmospheric conditions which are not very conducive for the human beings. And this results in physiological stress in human beings and it also leads to death sometimes. Further, the Indian Meteorological Department IMD and the World Meteorological Department WMO have given out the criteria for declaring a heat wave. So let us look at them. So the IMD defines that if temperature at a station reaches at least 40 degrees Celsius in plains and 30 degrees Celsius for the hilly regions. So this is the minimum temperature. Above which heat wave conditions will be declared. And below these temperatures, the heat waves will not be considered. Further, it will be considered as a normal heat wave if the departure of the temperature from the normal range of temperature is about 5 degree to 6 degrees centigrade. And it will be declared as a severe heat wave if the departure from the normal temperature is of about 7 degrees Celsius. Further, if the temperature is above 40 degrees Celsius and the departure from the normal temperature is about 4 degree to 5 degrees Celsius, it will be termed as a heat wave. However, it will be termed as a severe heat wave if the departure from the normal temperature is of 6 degrees centigrade or more. And further, where the temperature crosses 45 degrees centigrade, it will always be considered as a heat wave. So these are few criteria which have been defined by the IMD related to the declaration of heat wave. Further, the World Meteorological Organization or WMO identifies a heat wave when the daily maximum temperature of more than 5 consecutive days exceeds the average maximum temperature of 50 degrees centigrade. Further, while writing answers on heat wave, it is always good to use some data. So in that case, you can write that among the 5 warmest years in India, these years were 1901, 2016, 2009, 2010 and 2015. Further, another important data related to heat waves is that 11 of the warmest years in India since 1901 were between the years 2004 to 2018. So this shows that the intensity of heat waves is increasing day by day. And that is why it has become a serious issue for public health and welfare. Now after this, let us look at what are the causes of heat waves and what is the impact of heat waves. Now regarding the factors or the causes which lead to heat waves, the first and the foremost is high atmospheric pressure. And as we all know that the high atmospheric pressure is usually associated with the deserts. And whenever there is presence of high atmospheric pressure, the other weather systems do not move into that area, and which is why the heat waves persist for several days or weeks. And this is mostly because it stops any activity of wind and moisture. And such conditions prevail in the northwestern part of India in the months of summer. And that is why high atmospheric pressure is one of the most important factors which lead to heat waves. So it is a natural factor. Now the second reason is the weakening and the position of the jet streams. So during a heat wave, a jet stream lies above an affected area and disallows the transportation of polar air masses or cool air masses to any area. And that is why it leads to substantial increase in the heat wave situation where the jet streams exist. Further, due to the weakening or slower speed of jet streams, there is less change in the weather patterns, and this leads to increasing stationary weather conditions. And which is why when the conditions are stable and there is no exchange of winds, it leads to persistent heat wave situation for a longer period of time. The third most important reason is the weakening of monsoons in India. Now we all know that monsoon brings relief from the heat of summers. However, monsoon can be weakened because of breaks in the monsoon and also because of persistence of El Nino effect. And whenever there is weak monsoon and presence of El Nino, the heat wave conditions in India are exaggerated or increased. The fourth important reason is the urban heat island effect. Now, as we all know that the urban landscapes are known for concrete works. And this increasing concretization and removal of vegetation leads to increasing heat energy being stored in the urban areas. Further, the pollution is aggravated because of pollutions which is caused by vehicles and industries, and the immense use of energy-based air conditioners, factories, etc. So the urban heat island effect and the urban areas are adversely impacted because of heat waves, and these urban heat islands adversely impact the heat waves as well as they promote the generation and persistence of heat waves in urban areas. And the final and the most important reason is the global warming. And that is why fluctuations have been witnessed in almost every part of the world. So for example, India has been witnessing heat waves at an increasing intensity in the past 15 years. Further, Europe is presently facing the worst heat wave conditions that it had witnessed in the last 100 years. And these are attributed to the effect of global warming caused by the CO2 emissions. So while writing answers related to heat waves, you can highlight all these causes or factors which lead to the generation and persistence of heat waves. Now the next important point is related to the impact of heat waves. And regarding the impact of heat waves, we should know that what is the impact of heat waves on human health, what is its impact on the economy of a nation, and thirdly, let us also look at what is the impact of heat wave on plants and animals. So regarding the impact of heat waves on human health, the first and foremost is related to the cardiac arrests, heat strokes and dehydration. And all these conditions lead to secondary impacts on the human health. So these secondary impacts include organ damage which are resultant of the dehydration which is caused by the heat waves. Further, the persistent heat wave conditions lead to exhaustion and impairment in the mental and physical capacity of human beings. And it can also lead to death sometimes. Further, other issues or other health issues related to heat waves include heat cramps, heat rashes, and heat exhaustion, which can lead to heat strokes as well. Now, prevalence of heat wave has impact on economy as well. This is because it adversely impacts the performance of infrastructure on which the economy is based. So the worst affected sectors are the railways and the roadways. And this is because of buckling of rail lines and also the road lines. Further, in a country like India, where the summer season is long and has high temperatures, the air conditioning systems might fail working because of high heat conditions. It also leads to shortage of drinking water and electricity because of huge demand in the months of summers and especially during the heat wave situations. Further, the IPCC or the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change in its fifth assessment report has said that global economy would fall by 20% by the end of this century in the event of a 4 degree centigrade rise in the temperatures. And this is likely to have the worst effect in the South Asia, which is more prone to rise in temperatures. And as we all know that the adverse impact of rise in temperatures will be felt on the agricultural sector and would lead to crop losses and especially to the kharif crops in India. It will also adversely impact the yields in the Indian subcontinent. Further, regarding the plants and animals, the heat waves lead to mass mortality of individual animal species. For example, the flying foxes have been adversely affected by the heat wave. Now, the adverse impact of heat wave on the forests can be seen in terms of forest fires. This is because heat waves lead to conditions which are favorable for the forest fires. And that is why it leads to adverse impact on the forests and the animals which live in the forest areas. Now, after understanding what is meant by heat waves, what is the criteria for declaration of heat waves, and also what are the causes and the effects of heat wave, let us look at what are the steps that have been taken in India and what are the key suggestions which have been provided by the National Disaster Management Authority. So in the year 2013, the Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation had launched a heat action plan. And this heat action plan was advised by the NDMA to all the states which suffer from heat wave situations. And the key components of this heat action plan were 7-day forecast of the increase in temperature and also massive public awareness campaigns. Further, the IMD also provides city-specific forecast for the increase in temperatures. Now, the key strategies which have been advised by the National Disaster Management Authority regarding the management of heat wave situations. The first is the establishment of early warning system and interagency coordination, which means that all the agencies involved in the management of heat wave conditions, for example, the Weather Forecasting Department or the IMD, the municipal bodies, state government, and the district administration. Second is related to the capacity building and training for the healthcare professionals. This is because in times of heat waves, there will be a surge in the cases of dehydration and heat strokes in the primary health centers or other health centers as well. So that is why there is a need for capacity building and training programs which specifically target the people who are suffering from heat wave related heat strokes and dehydration, etc. Further, third is the dissemination of public awareness messages through the use of electronic and social media. And the fourth important aspect is the collaboration of NGOs and the civil society in improving the situations of public spaces so that they do not adversely impact the public at large due to heat waves. Now, the questions related to disaster management are pretty straightforward. However, you should be aware of diversity of points regarding the causes, impacts, and effects of such situations. So after going through our discussion related to heat waves, its effects, its causes, and the key strategies to handle this, you should try and answer this question from your mains examination point of view. And with this, let's move to the next article. Now, this article on page number 15 is related to the various issues and challenges with the nuclear energy in India. And it talks about ocean energy as an alternative to the challenges being faced in the nuclear energy. So this will form a part of the General Studies paper 3 under the topic infrastructure and under the subtopic energy. So let us look at what are the key issues and challenges that have been highlighted regarding the nuclear energy in India. And also let us look at what are the options available in terms of ocean energy in India. So some of the points which are mentioned here can be used in writing answers related to the energy sector. And especially there can be a question related to what are the challenges with the development of nuclear energy in India. And also you can write about what are the various unconventional or non-conventional sources of energy. So in that you can use the points that are related to the ocean energy. Now some of the points that we will discuss here can be used in answering this question from your mains examination point of view. So after this discussion, you should try and answer this question. Now some of the problems which are associated with the nuclear energy sector include, the first one is that the present share of nuclear energy in the current energy mix of India is only about 3%. So presently India is generating around 6,780 megawatts of nuclear energy, which is about 3% of the total energy consumption of India. So this shows that this share of nuclear energy in the total energy mix of India is very less as of now. Now further, with the improvement in the renewable energy sector like the wind and the solar energy, This share of nuclear energy in the total energy mix of India is likely to go down in the near future. So this is one of the issues of nuclear energy in India. The second one is related to the poor progress in the three-stage nuclear program of India. Now regarding the three-stage nuclear power program, you should note that due to less availability of uranium resources in India, India had conceived a three-stage nuclear power program. So in the first stage, it included the installation of pressurized heavy water reactors. In the second stage, it included the installation and usage of fast breeder reactors. And in the third stage, it included the advanced heavy water reactors. Now in the first stage, where the pressurized heavy water reactors are to be installed, it uses natural uranium fueled pressurized heavy water reactors. And while using the natural uranium, it generates plutonium-239, which is also a radioactive substance, as a byproduct. Now this has been conceived as the first stage because the natural uranium that occurs in the environment has larger weightage of uranium-238, which is a non-fissile material. So what these first stage nuclear power reactors do is that they convert this uranium-238 into plutonium-239, which is radioactive and can be used as a fuel in the second stage of the nuclear power programs in India. So the second stage nuclear power plants, which are the fast breeder reactors, use plutonium-239 as the fuel which was created in the first stage of the nuclear power programs. Now besides consuming the plutonium-239, what these power plants do is that they also produce plutonium-239 once again. So this means that while consuming the fuel, it also produces the fuel which can be further used. So this increases the self-sufficiency of India in terms of nuclear fuel. And the third stage of the nuclear power program uses advanced heavy water reactors. And under this third stage, it has been envisaged that there should be usage of uranium-232 and uranium-233. And as you would all be knowing that India has resources of thorium-232 in Kerala in its monazite deposits. So in this way, India can utilize its sources of radioactive substances like uranium for a longer period of time. So after understanding the three-stage nuclear program, let us understand what are the problems or lack of progress in this three-stage nuclear power program. So the present condition of India's nuclear power program is that India is still stuck in the first stage of this nuclear power cycle. Regarding the second stage, which uses fast breeder reactors, India has set up a prototype fast breeder reactor. However, this too has not proved to be successful. So that is why it is not economically viable as of now to install the second stage, that is the fast breeder reactors. And with regard to the third stage, which uses advanced heavy water reactors, the fast breeder reactors will have to operate for at least 30 to 40 years. And which is not possible because already the prototype which has been developed for fast breeder reactor has not been successful. So this is another challenge regarding the development of nuclear power program in India. And this is because as conceived in the three-stage nuclear power program, India is still stuck in the first stage only. The third issue or the challenge with the nuclear energy program is that initially India assumed that nuclear energy is a low-cost alternative. However, in the recent times, due to the escalation in costs of nuclear power plants, the cost of generating electricity from these nuclear power plants is increasing. And that is why it has now become economically unviable as compared to other sources like wind or solar energy. And still, the coal energy is considered to be cheaper as compared to nuclear energy. And that is why the electricity generated by the nuclear power plants is not economically very viable. So these are a few challenges and issues with the nuclear energy program of India. So in this background, let us understand what are the opportunities that are provided by the ocean energy. Now, according to the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy Sources, India has an expected potential of around 40,000 megawatt of wave energy and around 9,000 megawatt of tidal energy. So the amount of energy potential that is available in India with regards to the ocean energy provides a huge opportunity for development of this energy sector. Further, there are certain identified areas which can be used for harnessing this tidal power. And these include the Gulf of Cambay or the Gulf of Khambhat, the Gulf of Kutch on the western coast, and the Sundarbans on the eastern coast. So these two can be used, or these are the areas where the tidal power can be utilized effectively. Further, India has already taken up some initiatives to harness this ocean energy, and these include planning for setting up of a tidal power plant in the Gulf of Kutch. So in this regard, the authors have highlighted that the government should incentivize ocean energy on the lines of solar and wind energy. And secondly, there should be diversion of allocation of funds from nuclear energy to ocean energy. This is because nuclear energy is now becoming unviable, and at the same time, the ocean energy provides a huge opportunity to India. And further, this is non-polluting and there is low risk associated with the ocean energy. So the points that we have discussed here can be used in answering this question for your mains examination. With this, let's move to the next article. Now this article on page number 22 talks about WHO's bringing out of norms related to self-care interventions. And these norms have come in the background of likely shortage of healthcare workers by 2035. So in it says that there will be nearly shortage of 13 million healthcare workers by 2035. Further, presently around 400 million people lack access to essential health services globally. So in this regard, the self-care interventions become very important. And that is why the WHO has brought out norms related to these self-care interventions. So this will form a part of the General Studies paper 2 and will also be a part of the subtopic issues related to the management of health. So here it is important to understand that India also has shortage of healthcare workers. And in this line, these suggestions which are provided by WHO can be used in answering questions related to health sector. And you can use these points as best practices or suggestions that should be included in the healthcare interventions in India. So regarding the need for self-care interventions, as we have learned before, it is estimated that by around 2035, the world will face a shortage of nearly 13 million healthcare workers. And presently also, around 400 million people worldwide lack access to most essential health services. And that is why there is a need for finding out innovative strategies which go beyond the conventional health sector response. And with regards to conventional health sector response or conventional health sector care, you should note that it includes the healthcare services provided by the professionals, and which include primary, secondary and tertiary healthcare services. So in this background, one of the innovative strategies is the self-care interventions. Now what is meant by this self-care intervention? So simply the self-care refers to the ability of individuals, families and communities to promote health, prevent disease, maintain health and cope with illness and disability with or without the support of a healthcare provider. Now, one of the examples of community interventions in the health sector is the National Rural Health Mission of Government of India. And it involves the activity of ASHA workers which provide suggestions regarding the health care of individuals and families. So this self-care intervention goes beyond the conventional healthcare providers. And it involves individuals, families and communities for promoting health and preventing diseases. Now in its guidelines, the WHO has presently focused on sexual and reproductive health as well as rights. And some of the interventions include self-sampling of human papilloma virus, sexually transmitted infections, self-injectionable contraceptives, home-based ovulation predictor kits, and human immunodeficiency virus self-testing. So these focus on sexual and reproductive health management. Now these guidelines will further be expanded to include interventions in prevention and treatment of non-communicable diseases. So this will now go beyond the sexual and reproductive health rights. And as we have learned, all these interventions go beyond or outside the conventional sector of healthcare. However, the WHO has clarified that these self-care interventions will never replace or cannot replace the high quality health services which are provided by the professionals. And it has also highlighted that the utility of conventional sector is important in achieving the target of universal health care. So these self-care interventions are just innovations in the healthcare sector, and they are not a replacement for the conventional sector, which is important for achieving the universal health coverage targets. Now let us look at some of the benefits of these self-care interventions. So the likely benefits of these self-care interventions is that it will provide new and greater autonomy, engagement and self-efficacy in health for self-carers and the caregivers. And all this will be done without the intervention of conventional healthcare sector. Further, it would help in expanding the access to healthcare services for the vulnerable populations. And it will specifically target and help the people who are negatively affected by gender, political, cultural, and power dynamics. So, in this regard, you should note that it will also help and will be very important for most of the people facing the refugee crisis, and also in areas which are affected by war and famine. For example, Syria and Iraq, which has been facing war for past few years. So this is all about the self-care intervention guidelines which have been declared by the WHO. And this self-care intervention can be used as a suggestion in questions related to the health sector in India. And with this, let's move to the next article. Now, this article on page number 10 is related to the recent trade war or trade issues which have started between India and the United States of America. So this will form a part of the General Studies paper 2 under the topic International Relations. Now, in this, the author has highlighted that the United States of America is not using the WTO consistent policies for targeting India in terms of trade. And it has been targeting India based on the national laws of USA, which is not consistent with the multilateralism. So without getting into the details that have been discussed in this article, we will only take an overview of the issues that are available between India and United States in terms of trade war. So in this article, the author highlights that ideally the trade issues between two countries should be sorted out through rules which are based on multilateral forums such as WTO's dispute settlement body. So generally, when there is an issue regarding trade between two countries, the WTO's dispute settlement body is resorted to. However, in the present scenario, the US is bypassing the WTO's dispute settlement body by targeting and weakening this body. And also the US has started a kind of trade war with India based on the national laws of US. Now, regarding weakening of the WTO's dispute settlement body, it has blocked the appointment of members to the dispute settlement body and at the same time has targeted India's policies through its domestic laws. Further, India is being targeted by lobbies in US who wants greater market access of India. And all these steps are being taken by United States in spite of the fact that India's trade policies are consistent with the WTO rules and regulations. So even when India's trade policies are consistent with WTO rules and regulations, the US is kind of violating these trade rules or WTO trade rules, and which are important aspects of multilateralism. And moving away from these WTO rules, it has been targeting India's trade policies based on domestic laws, and also it has resorted to weakening of the WTO's dispute settlement body. So this is the overview of this article. However, you should know about the WTO's dispute settlement body and the issue of WTO reforms. And this question was asked in the mains examination of 2018. So this question, which was asked in the year 2018, talked about what are the key areas of reform if the WTO has to survive in the present context of trade war, especially keeping in mind the interest of India. And in this, we have discussed the details and the issues related to WTO's dispute settlement body. And we have covered this issue in the mains questions discussion in the DNS of 25th October 2018. So you can simply search for this DNS and learn about the WTO's dispute settlement body and WTO reforms. With this, let's move to the next article. This article on page number 11 is related to the issues related to higher education sector in India. And this article talks about various issues with the steps that have been taken by the government till now. So in this, it highlights that although the targets and the goals that have been set by the governments have been ambitious, the governments have failed to implement these policies in letter and spirit. In this regard, the author has highlighted various issues associated with the higher education sector in India and has also provided recommendations regarding the improvement in the higher education sector. So this will form a very important part of the General Studies paper 2 under the topic Issues Relating to the Management of Education and Human Resources. So let us look at the key issues which have been highlighted by the authors regarding the various issues of higher education in India. Now, the context of this article is that the new government at the center is trying to improve the higher education sector in India through its new initiatives like the Draft National Education Policy and the EQUIP project, which is the Education Quality Upgradation and Inclusion Program. And by both these policies, the government is trying to target and improve the higher education sector. Further, the past governments also tried to improve this sector, and various commissions like the Radhakrishnan Commission, the National Education Policies of 1968 and 86, the Yashpal Committee of 2009, and the National Knowledge Commission in 2007 all targeted the improvement in higher education sector. Now, the main focus of all these past policies and the present policy of the government have been on allocation of more funds for higher education in India. So the main target of all these policies have been allocation of more funds for higher education in India. And all these efforts are primarily targeted at improving the quality and increasing the access to higher education in India. And the underlying goal is that India should join the ranks of world's premier institutions and economies. So in this context, let us understand what are the issues related to inadequate allocation of funding in the higher education sector. In that, we will learn about the comparison of India with other emerging countries, for example, BRICS, China, etc. Now, let us look at the comparison of India in terms of allocation of funds for higher education. So, in this, the authors have highlighted that higher education in India has been chronically underfunded. In this line, India spends less than most of the BRICS countries on higher education. Further, the last budget allocated only rupees 37,461 crore to the higher education sector. Further, besides the higher education sector, the inadequate allocation of funds is visible at all levels of education. So, be it primary sector or middle sector, the education sector is not being funded properly. Further, it has been highlighted that all state governments which provide bulk of the higher education funding have failed to adequately support students and institutions. Further, central government, which is responsible for top institutions of the country like IITs and the IIMs, do not provide sufficient resources. Even the institutes of eminence fall short of requirements for funding, and they are behind similar programs in China and several European countries. Further, the funding or allocation of funds for research has been lagging behind the peer countries, which means that India is lagging behind other countries in terms of fund allocation for research. Further, the private sector participation in the funding of higher education is minimal. And in this, only few private institutions or the industry players are involved. And these include the Tata Trust, Infosys, etc. So in this line, the authors have highlighted that India requires substantial funding or substantial additional resources for higher education to improve the quality and build a small but important world-class sector. And massive efforts are needed at both the state levels as well as the center level, and also there should be a participation of private sector. So in this context, the draft National Education Policy aims at increasing the gross enrollment ratio to at least 50% by 2035. And similarly, EQUIP targets doubling the gross enrollment ratio by 52% by 2024. And the present scenario of gross enrollment ratio in India is only 25.8%. As compared to India, the China's gross enrollment ratio is about 51%. And in Europe and North America, it is about 80% or more. Now, besides the issue of allocation of funds to the higher education sector, let us look at various other challenges that are being faced by the higher education sector in India. Now, some of the challenges of higher education in India are: first is that India has the advantage of demographic dividend, which shows that India has a large number of population below the age of 25 years. And that is why India needs to focus on higher education because of this opportunity created by the demographic dividend. The second challenge is that besides enrollment, there is issue of non-completion of degrees, which means that although the enrollment is increasing, lot of people or lot of students are dropping out of higher education. Besides enrollment and completion of degrees, there is also issue of reasonable standard of quality. And India's quality of education in the higher education sector is comparatively low as compared to other developed and developing countries. Further, the employers often complain that they cannot hire graduates without additional training. And most of the companies which hire graduates have to again train these students for making them fit for employment. So all these highlight the challenges of higher education in India. So after highlighting several issues and challenges in the higher education sector, the authors have provided these recommendations. So first is that there is a need for dramatically increasing the funding from diverse sources. And these could include the budgetary resources, private sector, foreign investment, etc. Further, there is a need for significantly increasing the access to post-secondary education or higher education. And this higher education should consist of both quality and affordability. And finally, the focus should also be on retention and better rates of degree completion. Further, the focus should be on developing world-class research-intensive universities so that they can compete for best brains, produce top research, and be fully engaged in the global knowledge economy. Further, there is a need to ensure that private higher education sector works for public good to develop a differentiated and integrated higher education system. And all these institutions should focus on these various societal and academic needs. Further, there should be reforms of colleges and universities, and they should focus on permitting autonomy and innovation at the institutional levels. So the bureaucratic control of the higher education institutions should be reduced. And finally, there is a need for better coordination between various agencies which are involved in higher education regulation. And these include the coordination between the University Grants Commission, ministries, departments which are involved in higher education, skill development, and research. However, the authors have finally concluded that the draft national education policies and the EQUIP projects have reiterated the importance of allocation of higher funds to the higher education. However, there is really no need to increase the spending, but the attention should also be paid to the implementation of all the existing policies. So finally, they have highlighted that the focus should not only be on making new policies, but the focus should be more on implementation of the provisions of existing policies. Now, after going through all these points, you can try and answer this question from your mains examination point of view. Now, after today's discussion, you should try and answer these questions, and the answer for these questions will be displayed after 5 seconds. So the first question reads, with reference to the three-stage nuclear program of India, consider the following statements. First statement reads, thorium is to be used in the second stage, which is incorrect because the thorium will be used in the third stage of the three-stage nuclear program of India. The second statement reads, fast breeder reactors are to be installed in the first stage, which is incorrect because the fast breeder reactors are to be installed in the second stage. So the correct answer here is neither 1 nor 2. The next question reads, which of the following countries are part of the G20 grouping? And the countries are India, Singapore, and Israel. So here you should note that Singapore and Israel are not part of the G20 grouping. So the correct answer is A, that is 1 only. Further, you should try both these questions, and the answer will again be displayed after 5 seconds. The first question reads, consider the following statements about WTO. The first statement is that appellate body of WTO has representation from all member countries. Now this is incorrect because the appellate body of WTO has only 7 members. And the second statement reads, the dispute settlement body has 7 members, which is incorrect because this dispute settlement body has representation from all member countries. So even in this case, the correct answer is D, that is neither statement 1 nor the second statement is true. The fourth question reads, which of the following places have uranium deposits in India? The first is Meghalaya Plateau, second is Aravallis, and third is Bhima Basin. Now all these places have uranium deposits, and the correct answer here is 1, 2 and 3. So as you can see in this map, the major places where uranium deposits are found in India include the Aravallis, Meghalaya, the Bhima Basin in Karnataka, and besides this, it is also found in Singhbhum in Jharkhand, in Chhattisgarh Basin, and also in parts of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. So you should know these areas, and this can be an important aspect for us from the preliminary examination point of view. With this, we have come to the end of today's discussion. Now let's move on to the question for the day.